So we are picking back up with our series in the book of Romans, and we're now in Romans chapter 4. Stools here. And as I was preparing this sermon, I was also thinking about all the things that the students had been doing over the last couple of months. You see, about 2 months ago, we got the students together and we said, hey, let's talk about serving someone who's in need. Now, the students have always loved this. They've always liked finding opportunities to go do things. That's why last summer we did what we call the Summer of Justice. We did several events throughout Chicago in this area, serving those in need. But the question was, could we find an actual ministry that we could serve, like we could target and say, let's help these people out? One ministry that I have become familiar with was Mommy's Haven. As I mentioned before, Mommy's Haven is a home for pregnant women over the age of 18. It's a home where it allows them to live there for several months, over a year, help them get back up on their feet. There they learn work skills. They learn how to become independent. They even have Bible studies weekly, and it's a great ministry. And so I said to the students, what if we adopted Mommy's Haven? They got really excited. They started coming up with a bunch of ideas. We could do this, we could do that, we could do this. One thing that we could do is maybe hold a baby shower for the mothers. Another thing is we can do some service projects and on and on. And then we remembered the idea of a coffee shop a long time ago, about a year ago, when we said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we started a little cafe and use that to raise money for missions? And so we just took those two ideas and put them together. And we said we would start Eclipse Cafe to support Mommy's Haven. And so, guys, we've been kind of killing ourselves to get this thing up and running. The students have been here the last 3 weeks. They've been doing training. They were here last Saturday, not yesterday, but the Saturday before. We actually had a barista from Starbucks come in and walk them through how to make a latte, an Americano, and a mocha, and all that stuff. We had other people in the congregation help to put some of that furniture, that counter together to help do that. Ron to help with the corrugated steel. We spent an afternoon working on all that stuff. We did project after project after project to bring it all together. Now, I'm going to tell you, as I was doing this, as we were putting in all this time and energy to benefit this ministry, and there's nothing reciprocal, it's just what we give, not what we get back, I started to ask a question that maybe some of you guys ask when you're doing something good for someone else. The question is, what's my motive? You guys ever thought about that? You come to a worship service, you tithe, you serve, you take care of your kids, all that. What is your motive? Why are you doing this? Why are you putting in all this energy? For me, helping out with the youth ministry, I began to ask myself, what's my motive for starting a coffee shop? Other than I promise you, I will get a free cup of coffee every Sunday. The students understand that. But what's my motive beyond that? A free cup of coffee. Do I think I'm starting to earn favor in God's eyes? Do I think that there's a kingdom out there and God's building a mansion and he said, oh, Pastor Kevin, help the students start a coffee shop. I think we'll put it on a little addition to his mansion. For the youth, what do they believe their motive is? Do they think, well, if I do this, then God will like me and he'll show me favor. And the things I want from this world and this life, he will give it to me. A lot of you guys, let's be honest, especially when things are not going well, especially when you're making mistakes, especially when there's failure in your life, you go and do something good. Why? Because you're hoping that you can make some deposits in heaven so that God will like you a little bit more. Especially in those moments of insecurity. Especially those moments when you've really dropped the ball. You try to compensate and do all this stuff to win God's favor back. What's your motive? What's my motive? Abraham. We're going to study Abraham today in Romans chapter 4. But I want to give you guys a little context with Abraham. Abraham, when God found Abraham was not in a great situation. He was just like any of us. Sinner. Not perfect. Didn't hit the mark every time. You could, spiritually speaking, think of Abraham in a prison. He's in a prison. There he is. He's surrounded by a jail cell. He's in this, he's having this experience. He's in this place in life. And then you imagine in Genesis chapter 12, God comes up to Abraham and pretty much says, hey, you're in that place, aren't you? A place that you're restricted, a place of low influence, a place where you're not doing anything. I am going to make a promise to you, Abraham. I'm going to promise you 3 things. They're sitting in the jail cell. I'm going to promise you 3 things. The first thing I'm going to promise you is land. Now, guys, imagine in a state penitentiary, someone comes up and says, you're going to get all this land. Not just the 1 acre that a lot of us have with the house, but land, Lake County, Porter County. You can get all this land. It's all going to belong to you. That's my promise to you, Abraham. The second thing I'm going to promise to you is I know you're in a tough situation. You're going to have kids. Not just a few kids. Lots of babies. Grandkids. Our grandparents are always bragging to me about the grandkids. Right? 10, 15, 20. God says to Abraham, your grandkids will be like the stars in the heaven, like the sand on the seashore. You're going to have so many grandbabies, you're not going to know what to do with them. But here's the other thing, blessing. I am going to throw so much blessing on you, and you will be a blessing to others. Abraham, there in your jail cell, I promise you I'm going to do all this stuff. So he's sitting there, restricted in the life that he's living at that moment, and God tells him that it's time to move. Now, I want you to imagine that you're in the place where life is tough. It's not going well. And this person comes and he promises you the world. Would you begin to think, all right, what's the catch? What do I need to do? What do you want me to do? Who do I need to serve? How much hours do I need to put in the church? How much should I tithe? If God or someone like God comes up to you and says, I promise all this stuff, what's your question? How do I justify all the things I'm about to get? What work do I need to put in to get the things that I want and to see this promise through? Romans chapter 4 is going to address that situation because the Jewish people back then thought, well, God said he was going to give us all this stuff, but we have our own work that we have to do. We have to justify our existence. So turn with me to Romans chapter 4, verse 1. Romans chapter 4, verse 1. The Apostle Paul begins to make this argument, and he says, what then shall we say was gained by Abraham, our forefather, according to the flesh? So again, is that picture of Abraham in his limited capacity. He is a sinful man. He is imperfect. And he's saying, what was gained by Abraham? How did Abraham advance himself to get the promise that he wanted from God according to the things that he did? It's a rhetorical question. But they're saying, look, what work did Abraham put in so God would give him the promises that he had committed to him? It goes on to verse 2. For if Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about. So if Abraham could say, well, I did all this great stuff. I earned my way out of that situation. And he can boast to all of his buddies, all of his friends. He said, I went to Canaan because God told me to go to Canaan, I married Sarah and we had a baby and I had all these sheep and I separated some of my land from other people and I did all the stuff that God wanted me to do, and that's how I got what I wanted from God. That's what justified me. That's what got me out of the situation I was in. So, the Apostle Paul's saying, yeah, sure, he could boast and brag that he did all this stuff, that God then said, all right, I will answer the promise that I gave to you a long time ago. But look at that last part of this verse. But not before God. So he can boast to all his friends how he thought he got out, but not before God. Meaning, yeah, you can brag to your friends how perfect you think you are and all the things you think you've done, but God knows the things you didn't do well. God knows the mistakes that you did make. You can come up with a list of all the great stuff, but God also knows a list of all the areas that you have failed. and you have dropped the ball. And to be honest, if you failed in one area, you failed in every area, and that cannot justify. So for Abraham, if you think about Abraham and the mistakes that he made, if you think about where he dropped the ball, then you realize there's no way that Abraham could work his way into heaven. So there in Genesis 12, God has said to Abraham, hey, get up, go to Canaan, I'm going to give you all this stuff. So Abraham takes his family, he takes Sarah, and he takes all the sheep, and they go to Canaan. But lo and behold, there's a famine. And he's a shepherd, and the sheep have got to eat, and they got to drink, and if there's no water, no food, they got to get up and leave. So he takes all of his sheep and all of his family, and he goes down to Egypt. But see, he knows these Egyptians. Especially a Pharaoh. A Pharaoh is going to take one look, and he pretty much says to Sarah, hey, that Pharaoh is going to take one look at you, and he's going to say, you're gorgeous. I'm sure Sarah's like, yeah, of course, I know I'm gorgeous. You say, you're gorgeous, but you don't understand. He's going to look at me and say, I'm in the way because I'm the husband. So he's going to take me out so he could get you. So I tell you what, say that you are my sister. He doesn't take me out because I don't want to die. So they go to Egypt, they meet Pharaoh. Of course, Pharaoh says, yeah, she's amazing, and invites her into his house, quote unquote. The big idea is that he wants to do what a Pharaoh would want to do with a beautiful woman. So Pharaoh brings him in, and suddenly all this calamity and all these bad things start happening. And there's all these plagues. And then Pharaoh finally realizes what's going on and brings Abraham to him and says, why did you lie to me? Why did you pretend? I mean, you put our house at risk. Your wife, I almost slept with your wife. All to save your own skin is the basic idea. So Abraham has this situation where he's trying to get out. He's trying to save his own skin. So he would even allow it to get to the point where another man sleeps with his wife just to protect himself. Abraham can't boast. He can't work his way. He's got enough things on his list where he just doesn't make the cut. If he gets into heaven by all the works and the activities that he does, you have a list too. You have a list too. And maybe on that list, maybe you did something last week or last month or whatever, and it just kind of hovers around and it's just on your shoulder and it's always there, and it reminds you, you know what, that thing you did, there's no way that God will ever invite you into his kingdom. You don't have what it takes. But then we get the next verse, which is a verse that we can all hang our promise on. It says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. In other words, God did not count Abraham's activities as righteousness. God did not count Abraham's ability to follow the rules as righteousness. God did not count Abraham's number of times that he tithed and he went to church as righteousness. It was that he trusted in God. That's what counted to him as righteousness. He said, I am imperfect, but God, you're perfect, and you're mighty, and you will take care of me, and you will make sure the promises that you gave to me a long time ago will be seen, and that I will fully enjoy that in your new kingdom. I rest in that. Nothing I've done, everything you've done. Nothing I've done, everything you've done. Galatians chapter 3 actually paints a great picture. Galatians chapter 3, verse 23, the Apostle Paul understands that some of this is a little confusing, so he wants to paint the picture of how this actually works. So he says in Galatians chapter 3, verse 23, now before faith came, we were held captive. Okay, so I want you to imagine Abraham is in this prison cell and he's held captive. And then I want you to imagine he has a friend here. Abraham's friend is also held captive. Under the law, imprisoned until the coming faith would be revealed. Feel free to put in parentheses faith. That's actually faith in Jesus would be revealed. So then the law was our guardian until Christ came. So what he's trying to say now is, you guys understand how the rules, the law works, and why that was a part of Israel in the Old Testament? This is what the law was doing. Abraham's there. Abraham's friend was there. The law was the security guard. It was the guardian. He had all these rules. Do this, don't do that. Sacrifice this sheep, don't sacrifice that sheep. Blah, on and on. And his job was to keep them in check and to make sure that these criminals, these sinners, stay in their jail cell and they obey the rules. Okay? So, if that's the point of the law, it was a guardian until Christ came. And what we see on the cross is Jesus' death and resurrection. And he walks to the jail cell and he opens the door and he says, Abraham, you believed in me. You believed in me. You trusted in me. Follow me into my kingdom. See how that works? Now, I want you guys to imagine they're there in that jail cell, and Abraham is having a conversation with his friend, and Abraham says, what are you in here for? He's like, I'm sitting here just like you. He said, yeah. And Abraham said, I'm really excited because I know I'm going to get out of here soon. And the friend says, what are you talking about? I mean, do you know how to get out of here? Because I've been working on this scheme. Let me explain to you what I've been trying to do. See this guard pacing back and forth, telling us what the laws are, how we're to obey. I figured it out. I do everything the guard tells me to do. He'll let me out. And Abraham looks at him and says, no, that guard will never let you out. His job is to keep you a criminal. His job is to make sure you follow the rules, but that doesn't mean you get out. And Abraham says, I'll tell you how I get out, how I know I'm going to get out. Because my God is bigger than this whole prison, this whole state penitentiary. That is what's going to get me out. So I'm trusting in him, and I'm waiting on him. That's what gets me out. This is the beautiful thing, is that Abraham is there in his jail cell. He's surrounded by his mistakes. He's surrounded by his brokenness. He knows he's done things wrong. God has made a promise. And Abraham is able to see through the jail cell and believe that God will get him out past his mistakes. His faith was greater than his failures. He had faith beyond your failures. What we struggle with is we're in this prison. And we look at all the mistakes, and we can never believe that because of our failures, we can never believe we can get out. Abraham could see right through the prison gates and see Jesus Christ coming for him. You must have faith beyond your failures. Do you? Do you? So, Galatians chapter 3, verse 23 gives us a good idea of how all of that works. And as we consider that situation, my question comes back to you guys. Are you still jumping through the hoops, thinking the prison guard of the law will get you out of prison? Are you there always negotiating with the prison guard, like, well, if I do this and I do that, and I don't make any mistakes in the next month, and I'm going to get all those promises, all those things that God has for me? Are you still in this place of negotiation because you think that somehow that prison guard will pull out the keys and let you out? And I'll tell you what happens to us. We do that for a long time. We do that for a couple months. We do that for a couple years. We do that for 10, 15, 20 years. We kill ourselves to follow the law because we think that that's what's going to save us. And then we look up and we realize we're still in prison, and we're so angry, we rebel. We say, this guard will never let me go. I'm trapped in here forever. Fine. I don't have to follow any rules. I don't have to follow any laws. I'll just live however I want because there's no way I'm getting out of here anyway. But for Abraham, he never looked at that prison guard and said, he's going to get me out. He always said, God is going to get me out. God is going to fulfill these promises. Never the law. Never the law. And so we continue. And as we continue, one of the things that we look at is what do we need to do to move beyond our failures and to put our faith in a God that is coming for us. Verse 7, it says, "Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven, and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord will not count his sin." So the Apostle Paul is saying, hey, you guys believe that a person whose sins are forgiven completely, you think that's a good guy, right? Right, yeah. And the Jewish people said, yeah, we believe that's a good guy. Yeah, his sins are forgiven. All right, so make sure we understand that. Verse 9. "Is this blessing then only for the circumcised or also for the uncircumcised?" So the Apostle Paul is setting them up. He's saying, okay, you think it's a good thing when a person's forgiven? Do you think the only people that are ever forgiven are the circumcised, the ones who follow the law? Or do you think that the people who are forgiven are also the ones who don't follow the law? Well, they would say, well, the ones that follow the law are the ones who are forgiven. I mean, in my book. And he goes on to say, "For we say that faith was counted to Abraham as righteousness. How then was it counted to him? Was it before or after he had been circumcised?" In other words, what he's saying is, Abraham, God looked at Abraham before he followed the law, before he followed the rules, before he was a good citizen, and said, "I forgive you." Not after. See, what we do is we think, okay, if I follow all these rules, then God will say, "I like you, you're now in my kingdom." But he's trying to argue, and he's saying, no. Abraham was forgiven and brought into God's kingdom before he ever did anything that was according to the law. And then he goes on and he lands it here. The purpose was to make him the father of all who believe without being circumcised. In other words, without following the law. So what he's saying is God wanted to make sure that he found a man that would start this revolution of faith who didn't have to depend on the law, that he would start this, and then he would have all these spiritual grandbabies that we all can look back in our lineage. Our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Abraham, who found salvation without ever doing one good deed in the eyes of God regarding circumcision, without ever following the law. He wants us to know, you guys are related to Abraham. He's your hero. Look up to him. Verse 12, "And to make him the father of the circumcised," so he's our father and our grandfather, "who are not merely circumcised, but who also walk in the footsteps of the faith." I want you to imagine that you're in prison. You're trapped by your own brokenness and your own failures. And you know that your great-great-great-great-grandfather got out. You know that he probably sat at this chair at one point, but he left, and then he sent you a letter. And the letter read something like this. "As you know, I've made some mistakes. Passing my wife off to foreign dignitaries to sleep with. Save my hide was my biggest regret. But I got out of here. Now, I didn't get out because I followed the law. I got out because I trusted God. I'm writing this to you because I'm your grandfather. You're related to me. You can get out too if you want. Sorry. The guard can't do anything for you. Just have faith in this Jesus guy. He knows what he's doing." So the Apostle Paul wants us to know that we're related to this man who didn't do anything according to the law and receive salvation. And if that's true for him, it's true for all of you. Can you see God beyond your failures? Do you have faith beyond your failures? One of the things that I've been thinking about for myself and for a lot of us is how limited our life is as Christians. We have been given so much, but we still sit in that prison cell. We have been afforded so much, but we still think that we're supposed to negotiate with the guard to get out. But the truth is that almost 2,000 years ago, Jesus died and rose again, and he opened the jail cell. and we could get up and leave at any time. You have so much life that you could be living right now. I want to end with this story. A story shared by Steve Deneff and David Drury. And it's called Young Boy Underestimates His Father's Generosity. One time, my dad wanted to congratulate me on something I had accomplished in the 6th grade. He took me to Kmart and made a wide, sweeping gesture with his hand toward the whole store from the entrance. He said, "To congratulate you, I'll buy you anything in this whole store tonight." That was a brave man. My eyes widened as I thought of the possibilities. At the time, I didn't have a full grasp on how money worked or how much money Dad had, so I sort of limited things in my mind. He didn't understand how generous his father was and wanted to give him everything. So I limited things in my mind. I didn't even look at the huge stereo systems, expensive bikes, or anything that cost more than $100. Instead, I chose a cassette tape case that was less than $50. I was content with just that case to keep all my cassettes in. It was one that I could afford myself, for sure, so I chose that one. It was nice. Only many years later did I find out from Dad that he had $1,000 cash in his pocket that night. What's more, he brought his checkbook just in case that wasn't enough. In my selection, I limited his blessing in my life. Imagine how much God has in his pocket for you. You don't ask God for all the spiritual power you could because you forget that you are his child, like me and my earthly father. You don't realize all he could do for you, in you, and through you. And I would add, you don't understand that the whole idea of Christianity is to be free outside the jail cell where there's all this life that God wants you to have here and now. Because you still think that you're imprisoned and you're answering to the guard. And the only way you're going to get ahead is by following all the rules. And Jesus is out there, ready to follow you. And of course, lead you into righteousness and morality. Lead you into making the right choice. But not in this limited, death-giving environment, but in this place of flourishment, in this place of an explosive life. You don't believe that that's for you. And I'm telling you guys, that is for you. And it's time to live the life that God always had in mind for you. It's time to get up and to leave your jail cell. This time I would like to invite the worship team forward as I pray. Heavenly Father, the Apostle Paul is looking at his Jewish brothers and sisters and is seeing people that are in prison, and there's no reason for them to be. Seeing people who are trying to work, trying to negotiate, trying to make deals to get out, and all they ever needed to do was to trust in Jesus and to follow him. Father, help us to see beyond our failures, beyond our limitations, beyond our jail cell. Help us to get up, to walk out, and to follow Jesus for the rest of our days. In the name of Jesus.